Would you go for 5 minutes? Would you like to say hi going on this computer for 5 minutes?
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Fabulous. I'm really excited that we're doing this.
Oh yeah, me too. This is good.
I'm just gonna right into the waiting room that I'll let in just a couple minutes.
Those are pretzels. We're not eating them right now.
Is there anything that I should know? Are we doing breakout rooms this evening? You had talked about maybe doing that.
I just wanted to say hi.
Hey, it's good to see you.
It's
I know
good
you
to
guys have a
see
little one on the way. How's it going?
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna miss you live because I have to put our almost 3-year-old to bed. He's recording it for me, so I'm very excited to watch you later. I'm really, really excited that you're here. It's so nice to see you. How are you?
You too. I wish one day we'll see each other again, maybe on another bus or something.
God willing. God willing. Yes.
Yeah, Brett, I mean, either way, we can use the chat feature. I couldn't remember if we had talked about breakout rooms or not this morning when I was thinking we hadn't. So,
I'm fine either way. Mm-hmm. And I'm the tech person at the synagogue for most of the programs because if I'm not the one presenting, then I can do the behind the scenes stuff. And because I do a lot of the presenting, I know how that should go, and that helps. Whereas explaining to lay people exactly how that should go, I find that takes a while sometimes.
Okay. Let's just try it. Let's just not do it. I want to see if when we talked, I was more wedded to it, but I've actually done a few of these without. And so as long as people are willing to talk, it should be okay. We'll see. I mean, we'll just try it without, but I'm still going to invite people to talk. Yeah.
That sounds really lovely. We have like 66 registered participants.
Wow, okay.
Which is screens, or sometimes that's individuals and sometimes that's screens.
Yeah.
So my guess is that of those, we'll probably have 2/3 that actually come. And of those, probably half of them are more than one person.
Okay.
So I think that 60 is probably a good guess of how many.
Yeah.
All right, great. I'm going to start letting people in.
All right, sounds good.
I'm really excited about this.
Hey, Rabbi Lawson.
Hey, hi.
Hello.
It's the wonderful when somebody talks and I have to hunt through the screen to find out where it's coming from.
Well, you get lit up a little bit.
Yeah. How's the weather there?
Rainy and gross.
Oh, well, it's like.
Well, you're having a hurricane too.
Yeah, it's like it was windy and unusually warm here because that Hurricane Zeta was trying to do stuff. She knocked down some trees and power out on campus. Nobody's hurt as far as I know.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's very good.
They had to cancel classes because it was power was going out and stuff. So.
Well, we're just having torrential rain that might turn into snow.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if we get snow here, it's just a bit. Like, if it snows, it shuts everything down, and then it melts quickly.
I'll bet it's a big surprise to most folk when it does that.
Yeah, but even in the South, like the South was shut down on the threat of snow because they don't have the infrastructure to deal with it. What we do get sometimes is ice. Ice can be really dangerous because especially in the morning, you can't tell there's ice. And people, don't recognize it. And there's like black ice and ice is actually worse than snow.
Well, when I had some experience in the South, the way people dealt with it oh, this is really bad stuff. I better get home really fast. So they all sped, not knowing.
Oh, yeah.
You don't do that, Auntie.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna start in just 2 minutes. We'll wait for there. I still see that there are people arriving in the waiting room, so we'll start in just a couple minutes. But I wanted to welcome everybody and to ask people to keep yourselves muted, except for when Rabbi Lawson asks for participation, and then you can unmute and participate.
I will say that I'm hoping that there are going to be a few students coming from Union College who are taking a class on the Black experience and religion in America. So we may see some Union College students showing up.
That would be wonderful. We'll welcome them in with open arms. So Rabbi, you give me the cue when we'll start.
Oh, me? Oh. Oh, sorry. No, the other rabbi. I was like,
oh, sorry.
I was like, why am I starting?
No. You're our guest of honor.
You can start.
My students only often call me rabbi. Like they're like rabbis. I'm not Rabbi Lawson to them, but they often call me Rabbi Sandra, and then it just often gets shortened to Rabbi. So I'm just used to that now being my first name.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's an earned name, so that's
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I'm very proud of it.
You should be. You should be. We're going to have a lot of people.
I see. It looks like a really good turnout.
Yep, 'tis indeed. Okay.
38 people so far. There we go.
All right, Mishka, all you.
All me, all the time? I'm looking for the remarks that I already prepared, and now I don't find them. So I'm going to have to wing it.
That's cool.
And I'm really delighted to see that there are this many people. If you're not from Agudat Achim, the community that is hosting you is the Sadie Schneider Rosh Chodesh Learning Fund group. Sadie was the doyen of our congregation many years ago. Sadly, she died about 7 years ago. She would be the first person wanting to sign on. So I want to welcome you, Rabbi Lawson. And I think what you have to say to us couldn't be more timely. Rabbi Lawson and I had a couple of phone calls trying to find a date when she could be here in person for a Shabbaton. And we never got one together, but it doesn't matter because we're having to do Zoom. There's really no choice. And given the weather, maybe not so bad. It may be the right choice. But the other thing that happened as we were putting dates together, we ended up with today being 5 days before the election. And our next meeting, Motzei Shabbat, next Saturday, will be 4 days after the election. So what we're going to talk about is very relevant, very, very timely. So I'm really glad to hear you here finally, even if it's only Zoom. But I wanted to tell people that you are a unique individual. You're going to come and talk to us from your personal perspective of being a Black, queer Jew, which makes you very unique. You have your smicha from the Reconstructionist College in Philadelphia. I don't know how long you've had that, but you have that honor and that title now. And you're at Elon University in Burlington, North Carolina, where you live with your wife and the most adorable dog. And off to the side, you're also a songwriter and a musician. So if you happen to be on Facebook and you look up Rabbi Lawson, you'll get to hear her. And it's really a pleasure to do that. So just some logistics. Because there's so many of us here, hold your questions. But if you have a question, go to the chat room and ask the question. I will moderate. And if there's time, we'll get to the questions and I'll ask them on behalf of whoever wrote them. We may or may not break into breakout rooms. That's kind of up to you, Rabbi Lawson. But Rabbi Spitzer is going to be the the technological wizard and make it happen. So you call the shots on that and let us know what you want. So I know there are people here from near and far. I welcome everybody, and help me welcome Lawson. This is where we all clap.
Wow. Thank you. What is, my screen's doing something weird. Okay. Yeah. Thank you all so much for the welcome. It's so nice to see all your faces, and I really do feel like I'm in community. Rabbi Spitzer and I talked, and Miss Miskit and I talked about breakout rooms, and we're gonna forego the breakout rooms. We're gonna use the chat feature, but I'm also gonna invite you all to talk, and so I hope you will indulge me on that. Just to give you a little bit of structure about what we're going to do today, this is a method I learned from one of my teachers, Rabbi Mordechai Liebling, a leader in social justice spaces, on the forefront of social justice issues long before it was very popular to do so among rabbis. And he learned it from Joanna Macy, I think. It's a good structure for tackling tough issues. So what we're going to do today, we're going to first talk a little bit about gratitude, and then we're going to talk about pain, and we're going to do a section I call Seeing Things Through Fresh Eyes or New Eyes, and then we'll do a Q&A. So the first piece, we're going to do some gratitude. And I do that because we're going to talk about some hard things. And there's so much right now in the world that's not good. And it's easy to sort of focus on what's wrong with all the politics and, violence that we see and murders that we see. And hate speech, it's just easy to focus on that, and news doesn't help. But I'm taking a page out of our prayer book, our Siddurim morning liturgy. When you open it, all the blessings before you even get to call to prayer, all about gratitude. Thank you, divine source of life. Thank you. And that is so that when we get to our call to prayer, our hearts are open. We're open to receiving. And it's harder to think of the day as this sucks when your heart is so full. And so I'm going to offer this blessing. And yes, I know it is not morning where any of us are. But as far as my heart is concerned right now, this is really the best blessing that I can think of, that we're all familiar with, to ground us together. And the other thing the reason I'm doing this is that we're in community. We're, for the next 55 minutes or so, we're family. And I want us to trust each other and to recognize that we are in a safe space, or try to create a safe space. So I'm going to offer this blessing. Moda ani lefanecha ruach v'kayam shehazarta bi nishmati b'chemlecha rabba emunatecha. Thank you, divine source of all. Thank you, God, for restoring my soul, breathing life into me. And the last part, you, God, are awesome. And so before we move through, I want to invite you to either use a chat feature or go ahead and unmute yourself and tell me the things right now that you are grateful for in your life. And I'll start. I'll play as well. It's fair. I'm so grateful. I can't tell you how grateful I am to be here. With COVID and everything, any opportunity I have to be in community is just amazing. And I'm also grateful that I have a beautiful wife, a wonderful home, and I still have a job, and that you all have come to receive what I have to say. So please, and unmute yourself and use the chat feature. I see someone, Bonnie has wrote that she's grateful for her husband.
I'm grateful for the fact that 15 minutes before we signed on, we got to FaceTime with our grandson.
That's
Dressed
great.
up as a pumpkin.
Oh, that's awesome. How old
Yeah.
is your grandson?
He just turned 2. And he said, Safta, I want to ask you a question. Never did, but that was a pretty good sentence.
That's great. Great. Keep them coming. It's all, yeah. We're gonna put gratitude in the air.
But that was the question.
I think so.
I'm his grandfather.
Oh, okay. Grateful to have the means to enable our children to successfully learn virtually. Amen. Not everybody has that. Thank you, Rebecca. Another beautiful thing about Zoom is I can just call your names and I can act like we've all known each other for a long time. I've done that a few times. People are like, surprised. I'm like, hi, Bob. And I'm like, I don't know you. I'm just using the benefits of Zoom to create closeness. Somebody's 30th birthday? Wow. So keep doing that. And if there's somebody else that wants to go ahead and offer one more out loud gratitude, that'd be cool.
Well, I'm grateful to be having this conversation tonight. I think this is really special, very important, and that we're all together looking forward to sharing ideas
Yeah.
and listening.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you. The other thing about Zoom is I often have to hunt to find which square is lit up. So the next part that we're going to do. Wait a minute. Oh, I realized when I put the last blessing in, I sent it to Miriam Spitzer. So I meant to put the blessing up so you all could see that. But Miriam's the only one who saw it. So now I'll put this blessing up so everybody can see it. So this next section is about pain. There's a lot of pain right now. We are suffering from an actual physical pandemic that has disrupted every ounce of our lives, and sadly, many have lost their lives because of this pandemic. We're also suffering the pain of racism in our society, and we have the pain of maybe you didn't realize that racism still existed, or maybe you did and you have some shame or pain around not doing anything about it. Maybe you're just waking up to all of the inequities that are in our society, and you don't know what to do with it. Maybe you are just in so much pain from what you're witnessing, possibly after the death of George Floyd, because that was really painful to watch. And our country is sick. Our country is sick. We are sick from an actual pandemic, and we are sick from racism, sexism, xenophobia, homophobia, anti-Semitism. And we can't heal ourselves if we don't actually know that we're sick. And so this blessing is for all that pain, all that hurt, and all that sickness. I learned this from Rabbi Annie Lewis, who, she's not the author of it. She learned it from someone else, but I like to credit my teachers. And so I'm going to sing it for you all. When the world is sick, can't no one be well, but I dreamt we're all beautiful and strong. When the world is sick, can't no one be well, but I dreamt we're all beautiful and strong. Mishabera Avotenu Abraham Yitzhak Be'Yaakov Mishabera Imotenu Sarah Rivka Rachel Belea Uyavarech V'yirapeh et kol ha'olim Uyavarech v'yirapeh et hakol Uyavarech v'yirapeh et kol ha'olim Uyavarech v'yirapeh et hakol. When the world is sick, can't no one be well, but I dreamt we're all beautiful and strong. And so now what I want to invite you all to do is to, if you're comfortable, share whatever pain you are holding on to at this moment. And I offer that because often when we face challenges that cause us pain, we want to dismiss it. We want to push it away. We don't want to be uncomfortable with the pain. And what I want to invite you to do is to bring it out into the universe, bring it out into our community. Because some of the things that I'm going to say, you might find painful or discomfort, and I want to ask you not to dismiss them. I want to ask you to hold on to them and be uncomfortable so that we can move through the pain together, and then we'll eventually, at some point, heal ourselves. And so I will also play the pain that I'm holding on to. My mother passed on Tisha B'Av, the saddest day in the Jewish calendar. And even though she did not die from COVID made it almost impossible to bury her the way that we wanted to. But we did. And, because of COVID, there was a backlog in funerals. That was not the way that I wanted to lay my mother to rest. And I'm sick of turning on the television to learn that another young Black person has been killed by police officers or someone who believes that they have the authority or the power of a gun to take someone's life. So if you're comfortable, unmute yourselves and maybe tell me what some of the pain that you're holding on to, or use the chat feature. And you just go ahead and talk, Judith. You don't have to raise your hand.
Okay. First, number one, I received an email or a message that a Black woman physician died in childbirth. That is horrifying, absolutely horrifying in this day and age. Number two, I'm old, and will I be able to get back to normal before I die? I mean, that sounds dramatic, but.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you. I had not heard about the doctor, so thank you for sharing.
Scarier place for my children than what I had growing up. And I worry about my children and my grandchildren.
Is that Randy? Thank you. Bonnie wrote, realizing that what I was taught about America as a child was not true. Dan wrote, grateful. Well, that's back to gratitude, but I just now catching this. That he's grateful to live. I live in a country where all have free speech and freedom of religion and press. Amen. And Jill wrote, it's all too much. And Rabbi wrote, feeling that I'm living in an alternative universe. Amen.
missing friends I've left behind over the years.
Yeah. So continue to use the chat feature to either lift up the things that you're grateful for, or to share the things that you're holding on to that are causing you pain. Another reason I like to do this is because, you know, this is being recorded. The chat feature will live with the video, and you all as a community, because we're going to have a few sessions together, can go back and look at the chat. So now what I'm going to talk about, this is a section I call Seeing Things with New Eyes. And so I'm going to talk about racism in the Jewish community, racism in our community. I'm also going to talk about systemic racism in the United States. Even though racism does travel borders, and racism exists all over the world, it does look different in different parts of the world. And so what I'm talking about is specifically to racism in the United States. So I want to invite you to sit back. This is the straight talk of my talk. And with an open heart, I hope that you receive what I have to say. So as you know, I'm a Black rabbi. And our rabbi who happens to be Black. And as a Black American, I've grown accustomed to experiencing racism in public spaces. As a Black Jew, I have watched many in the Jewish community, or watched many Jews who benefit from white privilege make false assumptions about who is and who is not Jewish. In other words, I, as a Black Jew, regularly experience racism in Jewish spaces. My experiences, however, are not unique. Other Jews of color can relate to my experiences. In fact, I have never been in a Jewish space where at some point my Jewish identity has not been questioned. I have never been in a Jewish space where at some point my Jewish identity has not been questioned. I just want to make sure you all hear that. I have been asked multiple times upon entering Jewish spaces if I belong. I've really been asked by strangers, how am I Jewish? When did I convert? Am I an ordained rabbi? Or don't you have to be Jewish to be a rabbi? Or what's that thing on your head? Of which I often reply, you know exactly what it is. But people have said, I've just never seen it on a Black person before. So, and so on, things like that. This kind of questioning, and somehow some might call it an investigation, even if well-informed, makes me and people who look like me feel uncomfortable. And even if I do not engage or want to reply, I am often prevented from going on with my day. I am bombarded with why you as a white person need to know intimate details about my life. Questions like these send messages to people of color like me that we do not belong, and in order to belong, white people need to feel safe. So I'm going to talk about systemic racism. Late in the spring, I shared a tweet. I do tweet a lot, and I have a sizable following on Twitter, but this tweet has gotten, I believe, more attention than any other tweet that I've ever tweeted. And this is the quote. This is the tweet. Let me be, and I think I wrote this after watching something on television or my own personal frustration. I wrote, let me be clear. You are either racist or anti-racist. Those are the two choices. The latter means you are working every day, either emotionally or physically, to dismantle the racism that we all have been taught since day one of living in the United States. Now that's the tweet. As I mentioned, the tweet got a lot of attention, but I want to take the time to unpack the tweet. So I'll start with an analogy. People seem to like this analogy. I don't even know how I came up with it. I started using it when I was teaching at a college in Baltimore. The analogy I use to explain racism, and also to explain any kind of systemic discrimination that we have in our society, this analogy works. So the analogy I often use to explain racism is that of a baby. And so imagine that we are all beautiful babies. We are beautiful babies with no biases because we have not learned any yet. Now imagine that we are babies and we are out in the rain getting wet. My wife asked me a long time ago, why is a baby in the rain? Just go with me. It's just part of the story. But, don't focus on why the baby's out in the rain. But the baby's out in the rain getting wet. Also imagine that the rain is made up of all the biases that we have learned about different groups in our society. So that rain is racism. That rain is homophobia. That rain is sexism and anti-Semitism and xenophobia, and so on. As we grow up, we continue to get rained on and learn untrue stories based on stereotypes about Black people, people of color, and other marginalized groups. The messages that the rain conveys tells us that in America, being white, straight, and Christian is normative. And hopefully, as we grow up, we will notice and realize at some point that we are soaked from rain. And we will try hard to unlearn all the biases that we were taught. We want to unlearn them because we don't want to be racist, and we don't want to contribute to a racist system, and we want to treat everyone equally. So we dry off. The problem is that the rain returns over and over again, and we have to continue to dry off. That is racism. Racism keeps coming back, and we have to work hard to unlearn what we have been taught about Black people and other marginalized groups in our society. We all suffer from the ills of racism because we are all a product of a system designed to privilege one group of people over another group of people. And so we can choose to be racist or we can choose to be anti-racist. Now, I understand that when I use the word racist, that, first of all, I have no idea of what your definition of racism is, but what I do know that for many people, it is the worst possible thing that you could call someone. Because racism is associated with KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, also someone who is a neo-Nazi, or maybe we're thinking of American slavery and lynching. And yes, those are excellent examples of racism. But focusing on those definitions of what it means to be racist keeps many white people from identifying racism in their own communities and in their daily lives, and in understanding that racism has evolved. It also causes many to proclaim, I'm not racist, or I don't see color, and causing many Jews to say, I am not white. The problem is that saying that you were not racist also means that you were not doing anything to dismantle our racist system. Or if you are colorblind and you don't see race, how will you ever understand racism? And how will you ever understand the racism that Black people experience? And how will you understand the racism that I experience from other Jews? So following the murders of George Floyd in Minnesota, Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, Breonna Taylor in Kentucky. I see the efforts that many in the Jewish community are making to condemn racism in our society. And believe me, it is much appreciated by me and other Jews of color. We're proud. I'm proud to see us, to see our community on the front lines, doing the hard work to try to fight racism in our society. Where we fail is we also must do the hard work to be anti-racist in our own Jewish communities. Seeing Jews and Judaism through the lens of whiteness allows many in the American Jewish community to be racist and not see racism when it is happening in our communities. The assumption that Jews are white renders Black Jews invisible, which results in me often not being seen or considered as authentically Jewish or not Jewish at all. The racism that I experience in the world today looks vastly different from the racism my parents experienced in the 50s and 60s. And the racism that my parents experienced, thank God, and the racism my parents' experienced, thank God, looks vastly different than the racism my parents experienced and the racism I experienced, but it's still racism. The concentration on the KKK and neo-Nazis as examples of racism narrows the focus of racism and makes many white Americans believe that they have never witnessed racist behavior unless it's on video, and creates the assumption for many that racism in America is over. So, to my Jewish family, who I love, we must listen to the experiences of Black and brown Jews and other Jews of color. We must acknowledge and accept that racism exists in our communities, and we must work hard to dismantle racism wherever it appears so that we can truly live up to our Jewish values and so that we can remember that we're all present at Sinai. So those are my words. Now, before we move to Q&A, I would love to know what your takeaway is from the words that I offered, or what has come up for you from what I said. You can use the chat feature, you can unmute yourself, or both. Just talk. You don't have to raise your hand.
Thank you, Rabbi Sandra. Your words carry so much meaning and depth. I have a son-in-law who is transgender, and we were having a discussion one day, maybe about 2 years ago, when my thinking was still exactly like you said. No, I'm not racist. It didn't fit any definitions that I was used to. And he was talking to me about being privileged. And I said, well, I'm Jewish. I've never considered myself a WASP or Caucasian. Yes, I've had a lot of financial privilege, but there too, it was so eye-opening to get into more in-depth conversation and realize that we have to keep refining and refining and refining and clearing out the cobwebs of thinking that we've crossed that hurdle or we're done with that way of thinking. So I just really wanted to say thank you for continuing to expand our awareness and for being here this evening and for helping us to build a better community by really understanding the very subtle ways that we all have so much more to learn and work to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Mhm.
Your words are really moving to me. And I almost feel ashamed of the fact that this is happening to you, and not only to you, but to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone here in this meeting obviously recognizes that there's an issue that needs to be addressed and is willing to take those steps. But my concern is the people who don't come to these meetings and don't see the issues. We have to find a way to, I don't want to say fix it, because it's not something you just turn a screw and it's over. It's something that's a process, but we have to find a way to help people to understand so that the process of correcting the behavior can continue.
Yeah.
I think we need to speak up in real time. I have witnessed some racism in close proximity, and instead of saying something immediately, I sort of waited until I got the person privately and then said something. But I actually think it should be called out in a more public way.
Can I ask Rosalie, what would be, and certainly Rabbi Lawson, what would be a more public way to call people out? It works for a real dialogue rather than people butting heads, because we're butting too many heads anyway.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. On the other hand, I would want to show the person I saw being disrespecting that I felt his anger, because that's what was going on. He was being disrespected. And I believe he was being disrespected because he was Black and because he was considered as less than. So in that case, you have to make a stand. And I think there's not enough of that going on. It's pretty enraging. This has been going on for so long. And I just read a great book by Cornel West. It's a little dated because it's from 1993, but he addresses this. He's a professor of religion, and he discusses the relationship between Jews and African Americans in the United States. And the racism that the rabbi is the butt of is that racism.
I would love to invite you to share some thoughts about use of language. For example, the Black Lives Matter movement, which I support, has landed on the defund the police as a slogan or as a marching order. And I feel that that has pushed a wedge between a lot of people who might support the movement if it were redefined as redefine or reimagine public safety. And the same thing is true with the word racism. I wonder if it's such a volatile, defamatory term. I wonder if would be more effective talking about identify the places in which you discriminate between people and don't treat them as individuals. To call somebody out as a racist is like just putting a block in front of their face where they're going to say, no, I'm not going to listen to you anymore. I'd appreciate hearing what your thoughts are.
This part is not the Q&A, but I will I will address that because I do think it's a very valid point. And what I'll say is that what you described is all about making white people feel comfortable. And that is what has happened over the centuries, which is one of the reasons we have not moved any further along this path. The one white author that I think explains this really well is Robin DiAngelo in her book, White Fragility. And also, if you want to read Dr. Peggy McIntosh's essay on unpacking white privilege. And so, yeah, that's why I say that the word racism it's a descriptor. It has become a powerful word to describe the worst in our society instead of the fact that our society, our system is racist. The way we use it, the way you would just describe, allows people like David Duke and Richard Spencer, the two examples right now of racist dudes, both of them say they're not racist. So what we have to understand is that I believe that we're racist because we're a product of a country that from day one was designed to privilege one group of people. And that first group of people who had privilege would be none of us in this room. So the people who had privilege when this country was founded were white men, basically from Great Britain or England or whatever they was called then. So that means that Germans weren't white, Italians weren't white, Irish weren't white. But over time, other European groups gained access to whiteness. And that also means that European Jews have also moved into whiteness. And white privilege has evolved over time. And racism has also evolved to the point that you can't legally lynch anybody anymore. But that doesn't mean racism is gone. The KKK, we can all condemn the KKK, but, that does nothing for the average racist experience that many Black and brown people have in our society. So I hope that was helpful. And yes, it's uncomfortable. I get it. It's totally uncomfortable. That's why I want us to be in that space of uncomfortableness so that we can finally grow out of this messed up soup that we are found ourselves in.
I would like to distinguish, I appreciate your response, Rabbi, to the issue about the word racism, but I would actually join Steve in wishing that we could come up with different language for defund the police.
I forgot about that.
I think that's been a a divisive term rather than reimagine policing or fund other services with, but what I really want to add in is I've started to read Isabel Wilkerson's book, Caste.
Mm-hmm.
And I am just so floored by her beautiful use of many different metaphors to help us really understand this. And when we say that there's really biologically no such thing as race, to get beyond that, to use her metaphor of caste, and I haven't gotten through the book, but I know she uses India and Nazi Germany as comparisons to American racism. So it's a book I would already, highly recommend. I don't know if you have thoughts about that.
Well, I've forgotten about the defund the police part, and I can't speak to that book because I haven't read it. And I do see parallels to Nazi Germany and caste, although I'm a little uncomfortable using the word caste for a variety of sociological reasons. But it's interesting because back to the defund the police. When people like me hear the term defund the police, I'm thinking of the fact that our police have weapons of war now. I'm thinking about the fact that our police often get more money to support ICE and detain people who look brown. When I hear defund the police, I'm hearing, stop giving them money to treat people less than human. When white people hear the term defund the police, they hear police gone, everything's a mess, we don't have police anymore. So I think that's something that we should think about. And I'm sure, yes, there are people who want police to go away. I'm not saying that's not the case, but we need to take a good hard look. I lived in Berkeley, a half a block away from Ferguson. The Ferguson border was just halfway down the street. And I went to the Ferguson Florissant School District. And I wrote a piece about this that lives on our website. When I saw what the police were bringing to peaceful protesters, I could not, and I'm a military veteran, I could not believe police officers had tanks, Humvees, things that I saw that are used for war that are not supposed to be in a small town police department. So I think that we need to think about the language that different groups use and not jump to the worst possible thing. Because like I said, as a Black person, when I hear the term defund the police, I already said what I'm thinking about. I'm not thinking that means police go bye-bye. But you also need to understand that the groups that suffer the most from police presence, and also who do need police too, are Black and brown people, because the laws were designed to hurt Black and brown people. That's why our prison system is overwhelmingly Black and brown, even though Black and brown people don't commit a majority of crimes in the United States. So, I hope that was helpful. So we can move more into the Q&A part now if you want, or you can also bring up if something I said that you want to highlight.
I was going to say is making us.
This is the part where you can ask questions.
I'll jump in.
Hi.
I'm working with a guy in our community who we're putting together a community discussion on systemic racism that I'm hosting at my office on Sunday. And he's Black, and he is making a distinction between Black Americans who are descendants of slaves versus immigrants who came from other countries, and saying it's not the same, what they're experiencing. And I don't know enough about that. I'm just listening to him, and so I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that distinction.
So I will say this, I don't know exactly what your friend is talking about, but I will say often when I hear this, what comes up is that when African immigrants come to this country, or brown immigrants come to this country, they also learn all the biases about Black and brown people. And so Black people who've lived here for a long time get pitted against African immigrants, and immigrants buy into the same stereotypes that white people have told them about Black and brown people. And Black Americans buy into the same stereotypes they've heard about African immigrants. But here's the thing that I would prefer that we focus on. If we don't work on healing trauma, so you all know there's trauma in the Jewish community, trauma from the Holocaust. In fact, the entire Torah is a book of trauma. But if we don't work to heal trauma continues generationally, and it makes things worse. So Black people have trauma of slavery in the United States. Studies after studies show that when African immigrants immigrate to this country, they don't have trauma from slavery. Why would they? But 3 generations in, they do. And so regardless of how Black people got here, or their ancestors got here, 3 generations later, they're still so all the 3 generations later, all Black people have the same trauma. And so that's kind of what I want us to focus on, because your friends, whose friend is talking about African immigrants, 3 generations later, it's not going to matter, because if we don't heal this, they're going to have the same trauma that all Black Americans have.
How can we be allies and assist in the process of helping to remove racism from the Jewish community without accidentally falling into some sort of, for lack of a better term, white savior role?
Yeah, so one of the things that I think is really interesting, and it's really easy to do, somebody put in the chat feature earlier about not that the stories that they were told about America weren't true. And I would add that we need to tell fuller stories. So we need to tell fuller stories about the founding of our country. We need to tell that, yes, Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, and he also owned slaves. And we need to tell, real stories, like what Andrew Jackson did with the natives, the indigenous people, defying a Supreme Court order to move massive amount of people across the country in freezing cold weather where they barely had any clothes and most of them died. We need to tell a fuller story of when Christopher Columbus discovered America. He discovered this vast empty land. No, there were millions and billions of people already here. I'm saying all that because one of the easiest things, or at least I think a place that we need to start in the Jewish community, is that we need to take a good hard look at the images that we are portraying in our synagogues, or the messages that we are sending in our synagogues. So I can't tell you the number of times I have walked into a progressive synagogue and all the images on the wall often reflect a bygone era of dudes, black clothes, prayer shawls, tefillin, long beards, payas, all that, the whole thing. And I look around the room and nobody looks like that, but we're still lifting those images up in our community. Or the synagogues that I've been in that still portray photos of weddings, of cisgendered folks, heterosexual weddings. And I don't see any weddings of same-sex couples. And so we are sending, whether we realize it or not, we are sending messages to people who come to our places of worship about who's welcome. And so what I would love to see synagogues do is actually use images that actually reflect who they are. Now, I'm not saying that they should go out and get a bunch of stock photos of Black and brown people, but they need to actually look like the people that are in their community. And I'll give you an example. I was visiting a synagogue, and long before I became a rabbi, and they were very nice, and some lady asked if I wanted a tour, and so I said, yeah, that'd be great. Not because I was new to the area. And by the way, she was when she was giving me a tour, she was asking my white friend how I was Jewish, but that's another story. But anyway, so we go to the school, and she's telling me like this, there's not that much diversity in the adult Jewish population. She said, but our school, we were so proud of our school. Our school is this beautiful rainbow of kids. You would love it. Of course, there was no kids there because it was nighttime, Friday night. And she kept saying how racially diverse. Meanwhile, all the photos that I saw of children were white. And I don't even think those are children from the synagogue. But all I saw were photos of white happy kids. It did not at all represent what she was talking about. And so that will go a long way to change the narrative of what we actually look like, to tell a fuller narrative. And so I think that is something that we just don't even think, people aren't even thinking about. The next thing is create rules of practice or rules for how to welcome people when they come in. Often when people of color come in, or some other person that is different, we throw whatever ideas of welcoming we have out the window, and then often proceed to ask them a bunch of questions. Why are you here? Who are you? You know, I'm so excited you converted. Whatever people say to people. And if we have rules of practice of what we do when people come into our house, you know, we greet them at the door. We escort them to the sanctuary. We show them a seat. We find somebody to sit with them, to help them. Like, rules of practice so that people get on the same page of how to welcome people. And then you learn how to welcome people. And then the other thing is, if you do witness someone being disrespectful or rude or racist or whatever is, you know, find some way to educate that person. There's my 2 cents. The lovely cat.
Our synagogue and many others have a very out there policy, signs, rainbows, welcoming people who are gay. But we don't in any way do that in terms of recognizing somebody who is not white. And I don't know how we would do that without having a whole lot of thinking to do it so it doesn't look fake.
Right.
And any thoughts about that?
I do. So I don't know much about the demographics of where you live, but I do know a lot about the demographics of the United States and Jewish demographics. And the racial diversity of the Jewish community is growing really fast. And the last 3 studies have put the Jew of color population anywhere, depending on which study you looked at, 10 to 12 to 15% of the Jewish population are Jews of color. In fact, there was another study done about 10 years ago that put the Jew of color population in the United States as 20%. But I don't want to get connected to numbers. It's just the fact that even if you look at 10%, that's a sizable population. And you may not have Jews of color in your community right now, but you will at some point, especially if you have people of color in your community. And if synagogues wait until the first person of color comes through their doors, it's almost too late. Because what happens first often, and maybe not often, but let's just say a white woman comes in and is checking out the synagogue, but you don't know that she has a black husband or a brown husband, or you don't know that she may have black or brown children. Maybe she's checking out the synagogue to make sure it's safe for her children before she brings them in. And the first time somebody says something to her that she doesn't sit right with her, she won't be back and she won't tell you all. And then she will tell her friends. And then you've really lost an opportunity to showcase how warm and welcoming you are because you didn't practice it when that person came in. So, or the first time a black or brown person comes in and they don't experience the hospitality that they feel like they deserve, which they should, they often won't come back, or if they do come back, it doesn't sit well with them. So you need to start as a community educating yourselves, you know, by reading books or listening to podcasts or whatever, on the diversity that is the Jewish people in the United States. And this is a start, having me here is a start. It's not an end, but it's a start. I would also, Mara Gad, who I do not know, I am Facebook friends with her in that Facebook kind of way, Black Jewish woman, wrote a book, I think it's called The Color of Love. I've not read the book. I probably won't read the book, and I'm not really recommending the book, that's what I'm trying to say. But she was a keynote speaker at last year's URJ biennial, so the Reform Movement's big conference, the last one that they had that they could be in person. And she wrote about this. She was a keynote, and she experienced the racism that she experienced at every point at that conference made me sick. And there's a beautiful podcast where she talks to one of the leaders of the Reform Movement about her experience. And I found it on SoundCloud. You can probably find it. And also, it caused Rick Jacobs to issue a public apology because it was so bad. And Rick Jacobs is the president of Reform Judaism. And they invited her as a keynote to highlight the work that they were doing on racial justice. And so you bring in a Black Jewish speaker and you treat her like crap. And I can't, the stuff that she experienced, it just broke my heart. It broke my heart. Like, I've heard a lot of stories, but this one is pretty bad. So what I'm saying to you is just start to do the work now. Don't try to showcase diversity you don't have, but do the work so that you will know how to welcome people and also unlearn whatever ideas that you have about what Jews look like or people of color look like or how people are. So, and there's a lot of resources. Trua has a bibliography that I helped put together. And there's books and essays and podcasts. There's a lot of resources out there. And there's a lot of other folks like Jay Fredge, Jews for Racial Economic Justice. They have a lot of resources on this. And there's other organizations as well.
I see that Joyce has her hand up.
Oh.
Thank you. Okay, so I signed up for this because I thought you were talking about the Black people in Jewish congregations. So I signed up as a Jew, and I want to say a couple of things. Angela, the rabbi at Central Synagogue in New York City, Angela, gave her sermon on this year. I am from Rhode Island. I live in California now. All my friends have listened to that sermon. Wherever they are, she gives a famous sermon, and they all listen to it. And I think and she's Korean, so she feels she fits into the Black Lives Matter. That she's not the white American who walks into the temple. And she beautifully explained to us, that what we do is wrong. And really what we do is wrong. I've spoken to a lot of people about this. It's called unconscious racism. We don't mean to be racist. And if I was in a temple now and a Black person or somebody that didn't look like me walked in, I would just welcome them and say, I'm so happy to see you. But I didn't know that before. And the other thing about my Jewish friends, I live in a retirement village, and most of my friends are retired. They feel that Black Lives Matter is anti-Semitic, that in their charter, it's got things about the Palestinians, and that's a problem with Israel, but it's not a problem in the United States. And we are Americans here, and they feel that they do not want to be a part of Black Lives Matter. So if you want to comment on any of that, that's great.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I get this all the time. This is one of those questions I'm always waiting for, and I do love to answer it. So, Black Lives Matter is a chant. It's a statement. It's a call to action. That started after George Zimmerman was acquitted from killing Trayvon Martin. After Ferguson, when Michael Brown was killed, it became a powerful call to action, protest chant, and was started, I believe, by 3 women having a Twitter conversation. One of those women is Black and Jewish. Black Lives Matter is basically, other than the things that I mentioned, a call to action, all that other stuff, is also a bunch of loosely connected grassroots organizations that fall under the umbrella of Black Lives Matter. One of the challenges in the Jewish community is when Jewish folks think of nonprofits, they think of hierarchical structures. That's not how grass movement organizations operate. In 2016, the movement for Black Lives which was a coalition of a ton of organizations, came together to create a massive platform, basically what they want to see in our society. A small, tiny part of this massive platform, wanting better lives for other people, was anti-Semitic. And I'm not going to try to say it wasn't. It was definitely anti-Semitic, but it was such a tiny part of it. But most of what it called for, because I know people didn't read it, I actually read it. What it called for was funding and military stuff, and somehow that wound up in the platform, causing many Jews to focus on that, calling the entire organization anti-Semitic, and claiming to pull funds that they never funded in the first place. So calling Black Lives Matter, so Black Lives Matter became sort of anti-Semitic. Some Jews stayed in conversation with Black Lives Matter organizations. I have a couple of some friends who live in Minnesota who are connected with different groups. And one of the Jewish organizations, Jewish grassroots organizations, said, we just got on a phone call with so-and-so, they're threatening to pull funding from your Black organization. And the Black groups were like, we don't even know who these people are. They've never given us money, we don't know who they are. So many Jews stayed in conversation with Black organizations because they saw, like me, because people were saying, well, how can you support Black Lives Matter? Like I had Jews say that to me, how can you support Black Lives Matter? And I'm like, look at me. This is not a fight that I can get out of, okay? And so the Jews that stayed in conversation with Black Lives Matter were able to help them understand why this language is problematic. And before the new platform came out this year, any anti-Semitic language was actually removed because the Jews that stayed in conversation with Black organizations got them to see that this is anti-Semitic, because most of them didn't even know that it was anti-Semitic. My point of all this is that if you want things to change, you have to stay in a relationship. If you walk away from the table, you don't have a right anymore to really expect change to happen, is what I guess I'm trying to say. And today, when the new platform came out earlier this summer, many Jewish organizations, not knowing what the platform said, had signed a letter in support. I did, our university did, and our Hillel also signed that letter because we recognize that the struggle for Black lives is way more important, and staying in conversation to help people understand what's anti-Semitic is way more important than washing our hands of the violence that we're seeing played out on streets. Also, I want to say to your friend is that Black people are not any more or less likely to be anti-Semitic than white people in our country. Black and white people are anti-Semitic for the same reason, because we live in a Christian-centered society. And when we stay in relationships with people, we can help them to understand why the language that they use is anti-Semitic. What I think is happening is that many in the Jewish community are starting to come to a place that many Black Americans have been for a long time. Black Americans generally understand that white America is racist. Doesn't mean we don't want to be friends with you. Doesn't mean that we want to wash our hands out of you. But when you say or do racist things, we're often not surprised. And then we can decide if we want to stay in a relationship with you. The Jewish community, for the most part, has not experienced a lot of anti-Semitism in this country compared to racism. This is not a Depression Olympics conversation. But when anti-Semitism does show up, many in the Jewish community are shocked. And what I think has happened in the last 4 years is that Jews are starting to understand how deep anti-Semitism actually is and the work that we need to do. So I'm saying this to say the Black Lives Matter is not anti-Semitic. Are there Black people that are anti-Semitic? Absolutely. But there's nothing anti-Semitic about Black Lives Matter.
That's good.
This is Roberta Steiner speaking, and my husband would like to say something. I am the space picture.
Oh. Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. First of all, thank you for spending time with us and leading the discussion. There certainly are moral and ethical reasons to fight bigotry and racism from the perspective of Jewish values. But I think there are also practical reasons. If you look at any of the demographics for our country, it indicates that whether it's in 20 years or 30 years, that whites will become a minority. And from that perspective, it seems like it's an important practical issue to figure out how we all get together, learn to live with one another. If we don't, there's just going to be chaos. And we see some of that chaos already. The other is a Pew study very recently indicated that this idea that whites will no longer be the majority is very upsetting to many white Americans. And so if we look at all of this together, it seems to me that beyond just the ethical and moral issues, which I feel are important, there are also overwhelming practical reasons why we have to figure out how we're going to get along together. If we don't, we're going to go up in flames.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So I'm looking at the time, and I do love talking about this, and I mostly love talking. I love meeting people and being in community. It is like 8:11, but I'm not trying to rush off. I often stay into the last person when people start leaving. But I will be back. You guys have me for a couple more months. And so I just want to say thank you, and I'll let Rabbi Spitzer, if he wants to say some final words, to say them.
Yeah, so first of all, it's really a pleasure to welcome our community to this conversation and to welcome you into our community to share with us your wisdom and your experience as we all struggle with this topic, which, as you mentioned, is not easy to talk about and challenges many assumptions that we have about ourselves and about the kind of place that we want to build together, both in our community and in the world. And so we really, really appreciate your leadership. And I just want to let everybody know the next time that we're meeting with Rabbi Lawson is Saturday, the 7th of November at 7 p.m. And that will be a dialogue, which will be between me and Rabbi Sandra, which we'll share some of our own experiences, go a little deeper into that. I think we're going to share a little bit about how we met in Israel on a bus, doing some touring in Israel, though our main topic won't be Israel, though that's part of this as well. And then we're going to invite everybody else to join in that dialogue. That program will begin with Havdalah at 7, and Rabbi Sandra has a guitar, and she's going to bring her guitar, and she's going to play just like she sang for us a little bit tonight. So we're very much looking forward to beginning that next piece of this series with some music together. And if this recording, the recording of tonight's program, will be on our website, so that if there are people who missed tonight that you think should hear it, it will be readily available on our adult education page And do tell people that the registration is not closed. If people didn't come to tonight because they couldn't make it for whatever reason, they should still feel invited and to come to the next program. And the final program will be at 10:30 a.m. on Sunday, December 13th, which is the Sunday of Hanukkah. And that program will be taking this to the next step by going deep into some Jewish texts and doing a text study on the topic and thinking about taking this work into the future to create an inclusive Jewish community of the future. And so I think that each of the three parts all build on each other, but they're also individual moments that will be, I think, interesting and exciting for people to join in. So I want to thank you all for sharing and for your honesty and for the what you shared both in the chat and the questions that you asked. And just want to close by again expressing gratitude as we began with for the things in our lives that are blessings, and for the way in which we can draw on the emotional resources of those blessings to be able to do this important work.
Yes.
And I'm just really filled with so much gratitude. You guys are awesome, and I'm so glad that we're gonna have 2 more of these meetings. And I really do feel like we're family, and I try to create, and I hope I did, a safe environment for you all to feel comfortable sharing.
Yasher koach.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for being here, such as who's here. I just have my brain floating around with all these ideas, and I will say, even though this has been a very hard discussion, this has been the most uplifting discussion in many, many weeks.
That's great. Great. And also, there'll be the next time we meet will be after the election, so we'll see.
Yeah, well, as I think I said, it was coincidence, but not entirely, that we got these dates together.
Yeah.
And thinking, yeah, this is going to be very interesting just before and just after the election.
Yeah.
We'll have a lot to talk about there.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. And I want to thank the fact that a lot of people are here from our congregation, and there are a lot of people who are not, who are here from the general community.
That's great.
And that just makes me feel really good. And tell your friends.
Absolutely.
Tell your friends.
Okay.
And when we can meet in person again.
Oh, yes, and of course, looking to that.
Come up and hang out.
Yeah, well, it's probably not in the snow, but.
Yeah, not the snow, no.
Not the snow. You're a Southerner, I know.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much. And I guess if people have questions, and Rabbi Spitzer, you leave the chat open or the conversation open. Is that okay? Or shall we just say goodnight? That's up to you, Rabbi Lawson.
I think we can say goodnight.
Until everybody leaves, because if someone wants to say something that they couldn't say in front of people, I just stay until whoever shuts off the thing.
Well, it's up to Rabbi Spitzer to shut us all off. Okay. Good night. And
Good
thank
night.
you.
Good night.
Rabbi, you've got a good community.
Thank you.
Yeah. These people might be asleep. I don't know.
Yeah. So that was really fun. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad. All right, I'm gonna go relax. It's a long day.
Oh, hi, Susan.
Hi, Rabbi. Hi, Rabbi, both. I just wanted to say hello. My friend and I have been sitting here listening, and I want to really say thank you for enlightening and
lived in the South. Like, no, he's a cowboy hat or trucker hat, cowboy boot wearing dude. And when he dresses up, he wears little bolo ties.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and so he loves that I grew up on like a combination of like the Oak Ridge Boys, Aretha Franklin, and Creedence Clearwater Revival. That's the music that I remember listening
to. All good.
And Johnny Cash too. So yeah.
I did want to say, Rabbi, that the suggestion that you made that, I'm sorry, I know you guys are tired. I just want to say, when you said to make sure the pictures look like other people, that was profoundly applicable. I liked it. Able to be implemented. So that's really wonderful.
Yeah, I really think we could do that.
Yeah, we could do that in our congregation. And the way that you said it, I think really I could feel light bulbs going off all over the place. So that was a good one. All right, you guys go. I don't want to keep you up. It's good to see you. Thanks again.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Take care.